Utkarsh, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you in this conversation in our new series, The Road Less Traveled. It's a series of conversations focusing on stories of people following their passion, doing things differently, going against the grain, or just breaking free from conservative ideas of success. And we're hoping really that through these conversations, we can inspire people to be entrepreneurial, even if not entrepreneurs. And I feel like you're the perfect candidate for this conversation. Uh, I'd
Thanks,
like to
Andrea.
I'd like to start with Karsh. A lot of people in India aren't don't necessarily grow up wanting to be entrepreneurs, right? I mean, when you go to school and all of that, our parents, there's a conditioning for to go out there and get a job. And you yourself had a pretty good job. What was the turning point for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to work for very inspiring companies and have had interesting managers. Um, but I feel that you're 100% right. One can be entrepreneurial within one's job or create a job that one likes. So I built Network Capital initially as a passion project, a project that started out just to scale mentoring and career advice for every millennial around the world. And it started off with a very simple idea, but I was moved by creating a category of one. And some of the things that made me intrapreneurial were the same skills and mindsets that helped me become entrepreneurial.
Mm.
So it's mostly a mindset, and it begins by attempting to answer what matters to you most and why. And I also realized that I'm a big believer in multiple experiments. And through my experiments, I realized that I enjoy the process of creating my path much more than I enjoy the following of a path that was prescribed. So it also depends on one person what one likes.
Yeah, no, and I recently had a conversation with Madan, who's also co-founder Game, and he was saying a similar thing, right? That there was always something about him that was entrepreneurial, and yet he defined this aha moment when he said, "Oh, this is what I want to take forward as an entrepreneur." Did you have
Yeah.
that aha moment of when you said, "No, this is me being an entrepreneur, not necessarily just about following my passion, but this project that I want to take on." Can you recall that moment?
Let me give you a convoluted answer that
Please.
because I think it will be more interesting for the listeners too.
Yeah.
Look, one way of looking at my career, a fairly young. I mean, I'm not like I don't think I'm in a position to give wisdom or advice. But one way of looking at what I've done is um, that I got insurance in the form of elite degrees and institutions and work experiences. And after getting that insurance, I did what I wanted to do. That's one way of looking at it. The second way of looking at it would be that this person conducts way too many experiments, studied engineering, then studied liberal arts and got an MBA, then got a Shivning Fellowship at Oxford, then, worked at Microsoft, what have you. And the third way to look at it would be that this person likes to, you know, conduct experiments based on different questions, or is he following his curiosity or not? And I think it's a bit of all of them. Constantly I have been following my curiosity, not necessarily my passion. So that's point one. Point two is that I did get a lot of great institutions and degrees and work experiences before branching out full time. And the third way is also that it's an amalgamation of all of them, and it works best for me because I don't like to categorize myself as one thing. I'm a writer, an actor, a community builder, an entrepreneur, um, a fellow of multiple institutions. And I think I don't want to be defined by one aspect only. And I think a lot of people would be looking at it with skepticism, saying that, how can one person be so many things, but it sort of works for me. I enjoy it, so I do it.
Um, no, and that's a fabulous story to tell, right? I mean,
Yeah,
someone who has many interests and you're able to give time and like you said, follow your curiosity.
yeah,
But sometimes when you look back, it's easier to talk about the excitement of it um,
yeah,
and the positive side of it. But there must have been challenges, right?
yeah.
Did you go through a point where you questioned yourself, or people asking you, hey, what are you? And I don't know, were there different kinds of
Hmm.
challenges? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. I have a book coming out in a few weeks, which I hope some of your listeners check it out. It's called The Seductive Illusion of Hard Work. And in that book, I essentially talk about the mental models and career principles that people can look at to analyze their anxieties and analyze how they feel about different things. So, in terms of challenges, I discuss how confusion can also be a great productivity and creativity enhancer. Because
Hmm.
there are two kinds of way to be confused. One is what you call hopelessly confused, and the other is productively confused. So, through the process of writing and thinking, and with adequate help from my mentors and friends and family and the network capital community, I have trained myself to become productively confused as and when. And that implies that I try not to be disempowered by confusion, or try not to ask myself, why me? But
Hmm.
rather ask, what can I do about it? And you're 100% right. All of this looks amazing in hindsight. So I hadn't figured this out the moment it
Yeah.
started happening. But because it kept happening to me and to hundreds and thousands of millennials who are part of Network Capital, I realized that confusion is your best friend. There
Hmm.
is no way you can abandon him or her. So you will have to embrace your best friend. And sometimes your best friend comes with challenges, and you have to learn to negotiate and define boundaries with your best friend. So to me, confusion has been one such best friend. And I love to talk about luck surface area, the mental model, which is essentially the fusion of two things. One
Hmm.
is how good you get at your craft and how many people you tell. So I think I've consciously, since the time I was at INSEAD and Oxford and Microsoft and in Davos, in all of these places, I've constantly let serendipity also take its course. So I've
Hmm.
done my job, done it well in as many places as I could, and to the best of my abilities, and shared it with friends and family. But one unspoken aspect of luck surface area is letting serendipity play its or dance to its tune. So I love that. And I hope some of the other listeners on the podcast or the podcast find it interesting.
No, and you've given me the perfect segue to my two following questions. I love
Hmm.
the idea of both luck and about the confusion and handling challenges. Could you give me anecdotes? I'd love to hear something specific. You know, we all like that story to
Yeah.
connect with the idea. Could you give
Yeah.
me one where the confusion you went through led to you dealing with a challenge, and
Yeah.
where you did the hard work and left serendipity and it actually happened? I'd love to
Yeah.
hear about.
Yeah. So one area of thinking for me was, should network capital be a passion project, or should network capital be a full-time engagement, to
Mm.
which I was able to give it my all. And network capital actually, I realized that there were pros and cons of both, and it was something uh, that I dealt with this confusion for a while. But this confusion again was really productive for me, because dealing with this confusion revealed to me how much uh, how what mattered to me at what time. And I also realized that people change as time progresses. So I finished MBA at INSEAD very young, and I came out realizing that I should get some corporate experience, and especially in the spaces that I was passionate about. Like I was always very interested in using technology for social good,
Mm.
and it really mattered to me, and it continues to matter. And network capital also mattered to me. So the process of dealing with prioritization of the 24 hours that you have was something that I dealt with, but I think I became quite efficient and constructive at it because Sandhya, my life kept getting busier. There was a book that I mean that's coming out. I had a weekly column with Mint, one of the largest newspapers here. Then I got to invited to speak at Harvard and Davos and INSEAD and many other places. So life kept getting busier, but because I mean, so far I haven't let confusion debilitate me, but I have been able to, use confusion to my advantage by just accepting that, I mean, this isn't an ideal situation to be in if and when, something unpleasant happened, and I need to deal with it. So I've been able to become a little bit better or little less worse in my pursuit towards that. So that was one. And in terms of the other question, I think you talked about
When you
managing
luck,
luck
when
and
an
serendipity. Yeah,
instance when you did your hard
yeah,
work and luck played its
yeah,
hand.
yeah. So I let me talk to you about my column at Mint. So I mean, Network Capital, even in its since its early days, used to get featured by media, thankfully, which was very helpful. Um, I had been covered by the Economic Times, Mint, and a few others. But I was invited to comment on a particular area because somebody on Network Capital essentially read an article that I'd written on the World Economic Forum blog, and it was titled "How to Get a Job That You Love" or "How to Create a Job That You Love." And she found it very interesting. So she forwarded it to an editor at Mint, and the editor liked it as well, and she invited me to talk. And by the end of discussion, she said, "Hey, why don't you pitch me a few ideas, and we'll see whether it'll be useful for Mint or not." So I did send her some ideas. She liked it, and she said that, okay, let's do 3 articles together, 3 or 4 articles, and we'll see. I like your writing style. And those 4 articles, I mean, touch wood, they became quite popular on the internet. And those 4 articles became 40 articles. And I mean, they became basically a weekly thing. And because of those articles, one of them, The Seductive Illusion of Hard Work, an international publisher, Sage, found it. And then they contacted me saying that, why don't you write a book? Like you write every week and, do so much research on these things. You should write a book. And I said, yes, I should write a book. And then they said, okay, you want to write a book for Sage? I said, sure, let's do it. So that's how the book happened. So yeah,
Wow.
there's a lot of a lot of luck
You
and serendipity
almost
involved.
sound like Destiny's Child, Utkarsh. I want to grow up and be you. Uh, but
Yeah.
looking back, okay, I'm not trying to make, if that has been your
Hmm.
experience, that's amazing. And I think that's
Hmm.
that's a fabulous story to
Hmm.
tell. But
Yeah.
looking back, are there things you would have done differently? Would
Oh,
do
so
differently?
many things. So many things I
Can
would
you
have
give me a couple of examples?
done differently. Yeah. Um, I think in terms of personal productivity, I think I'm quite quick, I'm fast, I'm super productive. But I think my daily routine isn't great. So because I had to, for the longest time, I had to manage writing, speaking, traveling, community building, doing tech work,
That's a
all of
lot.
it together. So my routine went completely awry, and which meant that I would sleep at sometimes 4 a.m. and wake up at 7, or sleep from 4 to much later. And my body could take it, so I didn't feel tired or anything. But I am not an expert at biology, but I know that this is not something that that is long term sustainable. So I think I am responsible for sort of not having a particularly organized routine. which will, I think, if I don't fix it soon enough, which will negatively impact both my productivity and my creativity. And I think network capital works. Of course, there's technology and community, but there are two elements that Sandhya we speak about a little more. One is the element of surprise, and the other is the element of delight every day. So there's a lot of creativity that goes into making a large global community work. And I think as the founder, I do need to get better at that. So I have compromised my short term for the long term. Oh, sorry, like compromise my long term for the short term in terms of productivity. But I should do a much better job of fixing the nuts and bolts of my 24 hours.
And that's an important point you make, right, Utkarsh, because we are living longer, right?
Yeah.
And we're here for the long run. So yeah, no, so I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
You know, you're probably meeting all kinds of people from everywhere, right? You have this fabulous job that you enjoy doing and meeting all kinds of people. I'd love for you to share an anecdote of a really nice, inspiring story. It could be, and you know, someone you met, an entrepreneur story, or just something you'd like to share from
Yeah.
this network. Can you think of one that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Let me not give you an example, but rather tell you how communities came into being and how much I've been inspired by other communities and other institutions and others. So
Sure.
look, from INSEAD, I learned that um, people from almost 100 countries can live, work, and do great things together. So I learned that an Indian and a Pakistani, an Israeli and a Palestinian, a Russian and an American could actually collaborate despite their countries having issues with each other. So I realized that peer-to-peer collaboration can work at scale, among young people if the culture and the context is right. Similarly, from Ashoka University, I learned that how can you combine math and music, like the beauty of liberal arts. From the Ink Fellowship, I realized that the sheer inspiration that exists all around the world. From the Shivning Fellowship at Oxford, I realized that how even an old university like Oxford has to adapt itself with the help of science and technology and constantly sort of combine
Reinvent it.
history, reinvent itself. From the Ricina Fellowship, AFGG, I realized that, just like in INSEAD, you can have young people from different countries collaborate for tricky diplomatic issues, and how you can have peer-to-peer problem solving on thorny issues such as, say, borders of different countries and stuff. So I've given you a handful examples. Like World Economic Forum made me realize that essentially big problems are solved not by competition, but by radical collaboration. I could go on because, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list of places that
No,
I've been
but
part
you've
of.
actually touched on my favorite theme, and I
Hmm.
feel like I don't want to force fit COVID right now
Hmm.
because we're in the midst of it, but we are.
Yeah.
And I feel like for
Yeah.
me, every time I think about anything or I'm reading
Hmm.
about anything, I feel like the big lesson to learn is we need to collaborate, right?
Yeah.
None of us can do this on our own. And what you've given me through these examples are ideas of collaboration and
Hmm.
breaking down big problems and coming together to solve them. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask you a few quick questions. I know you have somewhere else to be soon, so I'm just going to do our
Hmm.
version of a rapid fire. So,
Sure.
Utkarsh, uh, who inspires you, a living icon?
A living, I'm not a believer in icon very much, but I mean, I dedicate this in my book as well. I mean, my family in itself. I mean, you see these books. I'm not sure if
I
it's
know, I'm
visible on your
super
camera.
impressed with that.
Yeah. So I mean, it just my family. It's knowledge. The pursuit of knowledge has been the greatest pursuit. So just growing up in such an atmosphere, it really helps. It sometimes makes you realize that no, you have to be on your A game, which for some can be intimidating. But it is also helpful to see this. So I would
And
say
you've
that
had your
we
family support your ideas and your pursuits right through. There were no challenges along the
you
way.
know, I think that Jhumpa Lahiri, do you know Jhumpa Lahiri,
Yes, yes,
the
absolutely.
author?
Namesake, right?
Namesake, Lowlands, all of that. So she writes in a book that Indian parents have a perpetual fear of disaster, and I don't know about I can't accurately make a generalization, but I do feel that a lot of parents in general tend to be anxious, not because they want to freak us out, but sometimes because it is anxiety inducing to see all of this happening on the news. So I feel that Jhumpa Lahiri's model is true for most people from
Yeah.
the emerging economy, middle class, the world, not just India. So I would say that that is a little bit of a of getting used to that people have. And but I think that it can be both motivating and intimidating. It depends on the person. So
Yeah.
yeah.
My take on that is I think a lot of Indian parents like a problem to solve. I feel like,
Maybe yes. I
they
don't
feel like,
know.
okay, I'm
Yeah.
contributing, and there's
Yeah.
something, but yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
some of these questions are a bit corny. If you want to answer a different version of it, please do. But
Sure.
the question is the mistake you've made that you would advise, and I don't want to use the word advice. The mistake you've made you would encourage young entrepreneurs not to.
Um, I would say that you should be careful of who you fundraise from. I mean, I do not have a bad experience there, but from many people that I've spoken to, I've come to realize that it's really important to find the right kind of investor, because it
Mhm.
takes ages to get what you're trying to do right, but a very few seconds to ruin it all. So I'm speaking more as somebody who's observed rather than directly had a bad experience raising money. But I just thought that too many people chase funding too much and waste their time. Instead, they should be building rather than running.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually worked with a fund before, and
Mm,
a lot of times we would tell businesses that came to us, you do not need VC funding,
mm, mm, mm,
and that's good advice. So I totally agree with you.
mm, mm.
Is there one trait more than any other that you think is an important entrepreneurial trait or a significant
Yeah.
one? What
Okay. For me, my ability to uh, write well, speak well, and connect with thousands of people with the help of technology and some empathy has been very helpful. I think Network Capital has scaled to what it is today without a single dollar ever spent on marketing or sales. And I think because I've trained myself to write well and speak well and connect with thousands of people at once, I think it's been useful. And the key insight, Sandhya, is that if you want to build any company in the 21st century, you need to know how to scale trust. Because if you can't scale trust, you can't scale a company.
Wow, that's profound. And no, I really mean that. And a version of what you said, I just was watching an interview with Mike Moritz, and I used to manage the Sequoia account before. And he said something slightly differently. He said one of the key attributes of a leader is the ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
He says if you can't tell a story, it's hard to build trust and connect and all of that. So
Yeah.
no, that's amazing. And a most overrated entrepreneurial trait?
I think ability to raise funds does not mean the ability to succeed a business. So that's one. And because the skills that are required to run a business are sometimes different from the ability to raise funds. And the biggest examples would be the debacles of 2019 and 20, these mega companies that never made a profit for anybody except the founders. They were champion fundraisers, but not exactly champion companies. I'm not saying that companies that raise a lot of funding need to be necessarily troubled by that or vice versa, but I just want to highlight that they are two very different things. And I think the second is that um, too many entrepreneurs compete. And I would strongly recommend anyone who's ever thinking of competing with anyone to read my HBR article, Harvard Business Review published it recently on category of one. I think if you're not building a category of one, eventually you will lose. It's just a matter of time. So I fully agree with Peter Thiel when he says that competition is for losers. Yes, it is for losers, because the whole premise of competition is that with a little more effort, a little more network, and a little more hustle, I can beat you. And that is fundamentally not sustainable. How much will you hustle and for how long? So it's better to make your own category and make sure that you defend it robustly. I mean, the world's most prominent and famous investor, Warren Buffett. I mean, if you look at some of his investments, I mean, he can, like, you can call it whatever you want, but they are basically companies with a very, very strong moat.
Yeah.
So many times moat is built by being a monopoly. I'm not saying Warren Buffett invests in monopoly, somebody else said it. But the reason for that is that most companies want to become a category of one, where they individually and uniquely serve their customers in their own distinctive flavor, and that's a win-win for everybody. Yeah.
Moving back to our overarching theme of the road less traveled or travel, keeping the sense of journey in context. 5 years from now, what would you like to be doing?
I would like to be doing exactly what I'm doing today, which is writing, traveling, and building network capital.
Amazing. So you're in a good place in your journey. And lastly,
Yeah.
Utkarsh, a quote that inspires you, something that you yourself came up with or something else you've read, heard, a quote or...
Yes. So on Network Capital TV, we had Dr. Anamika recently teach a course called Shakespeare and Startups. So basically, she takes lessons from Shakespeare and contextualizes it for the startup world. And the quote that remains my favorite is "to be or not to be," because I think that's such an existential question. I know every founder experiences this every day. And I've added something to it called "why to be," because I think the companies that figure out not just to be or not to be, but why they exist, so the raison d'etre, I think those are the companies that survive and solve the problems. And I like to call them, these are the companies that are built to last, rather than, be a flicker on the pan and raise some money and disappear tomorrow. So, I mean, so that's just something that I'd like to leave the audience with.
Thank you so much, Utkarsh. More power to you. And thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it. Bye.
Take care. Bye.